Hello, welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Just Speak. I am your host, Claire B. And as promised, we are bringing you guests every week, or might be second week, that are very inspiring, amazing, and really authentic. And the lovely Isobel is joining us today, and she fits in every one of those categories. So Isobel, who does not like to be complimented at all, is fabulous, and we have a women's group, and I would say Isobel is a very big part of that. You're very nurturing, kind, open, non-judgmental, and it's so lovely, Isobel.
Thank you,
And
Claire.
I'm just really interested in you as a person. Like, you often, as I say, you don't like compliments, and you're so talented. You can turn your hand to most things, and just think.
Oh, Claire, you're awful. You're really generous, but I don't know if I'm that as good as you seem to think I am.
You are.
Probably a jack of all trades and master of none.
You are.
Yeah.
So Isobel, we're just chatting here, and you have some really interesting stories about yourself and an outlook on life. And as we've spoken about before, this podcast is about mental health, and just you go for it. You tell me.
Yeah. Well, I just feel that life's complicated, and it's no easy ride for anybody.
No.
People have all got their ups and downs, and everybody's coming from different places and different experiences. And one person's experience can be similar or so different from another person as far as things that are happening to them throughout their life.
Yeah.
I had occasions when I was younger where I've kind of struggled with mental health when I've been doing things that I felt there wasn't maybe the support there that might have been there when you really needed it. And I don't think people understand that. And sometimes it's easier to talk to people who aren't too close to you, like so. But it's about being able to take that first step and go and approach somebody like a doctor, if you know you've got somebody that's maybe even good with mental health side of things, rather as opposed to just the physical side of things.
Yeah.
Because with mental health, I think that it's not something you can see like a broken arm or a broken leg. And funnily enough, I mean, there's all sorts of approaches, and I think it's difficult. Everybody's got different degrees of insight into just... Everybody's on a spectrum, everybody's on a scale. So there's no sort of no normal. Everybody's kind of somewhere along that scale.
Yeah.
And they could slide up or down that scale, and they can be caught in situations that are beyond their control. And I find that especially so for children. Children can find themselves in situations they've got absolutely no control over, and their life is literally in other people's hands as far as decision making is concerned, although
True.
they do consult children more now than they've ever done.
Yeah.
As to, they do consult them and ask them, if I had a magic wand, what would you change, and what would you like, what would you want, and things like that. So that's nice to know that all that's kind of, it's come forward a lot in that respect. But there's still an awful lot of shortages, and I would say maybe just a couple of psychologists with the whole of Tayside or whatever with mental health, and there was huge waiting lists in places like, the youth centre at Dudup and all the rest of it. There's kids have been waiting for so long, they're practically left the education system by the time the help's there for them. So that must be really hard on people as well. It's just about resources, that.
And when you've had your dips and mental health dips, and as you say, that can be any degree. It doesn't, I think we can all suffer with mental health at any time, but it might be, from one extreme to the other. So how have you managed to get through these episodes, or what?
Well, initially it was quite difficult because when you're young, you're really quite inexperienced, and if you're depending on your sort of dynamics within your family, if you're like an elder child, you've got a lot more responsibility sort of for younger siblings and things like that. I myself I was kind of more of the younger person, although I did look after other families' children and things like that, but I didn't actually have younger siblings living up with me 24/7. So, and there was huge age gap between me and my other siblings. They were almost, not just like older siblings, but almost like coming into parental, they could be parents kind of thing. Yeah. And so they could always talk to me like in an authoritative way, whereby they're the parents. And even although I'm an adult now, I sometimes find that they do that they come along and like, you're the bairn sort of thing. And I could tell
funny how you can't shake it, isn't it?
No, you can't shake it off. Yeah. So it depends on I suppose it depends on your place within the family. Being the younger one, I always felt I had to stand on my own 2 feet. I never had anybody to fight my battles for us, or I had to be independent. And I wasn't a feisty kid. I was quite introverted and shy as a child, and I was very, very, very introverted and shy at one point. And it took a lot for me to actually come out of myself as I was growing up, and it was all a bit of a battle that way sometimes, and having to push yourself. And I don't want to be funny, but I had a kind of a stage mum. Had a kind of a pushy mum with a strong character.
Yeah, okay.
And I suppose in that respect, it was kind of, maybe it was just part of the era that you were brought up in as well. You daren't say no. You know, you had to go along with what you were told. It was like, and you were never allowed to sort of, you couldn't sort of like, it was kind of like you weren't, not that you want to contradict your parent, but you know what I mean, if you sort of come away with, you couldn't sort of put forward a view, because it was like, especially if it was in other adult company, because that was seen as embarrassing your elder, you know, amongst friends and stuff like that. So you didn't do that, and you learnt that pretty quickly, you know what I mean. So you did keep a lot into yourself. And then I think when people are leaving school, for example, teenagers, they sometimes don't have quite the direction. They're not quite sure what they want to do or whatever.
What did you want to do?
I always wanted to be a person who made people better. That's what I saw. That's why I went into the sort of health arena. Yeah, that's what I did.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to the health arena. Because I always felt it was a worthwhile thing to do. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I was always interested in that sort of, these kind of subjects, these kind of topics and things like that. So, yeah, it was... but on saying that again, when you're working in that kind of an environment, you're kind of really aware of the way people get labelled by, like, these things that they use for DSM and all the rest of it. And so...
What's DSM?
The manual of the statistical manual of mental health issues. Right. So you're kind of like, I don't know if I've got the right words, because I'm tired and my memory's not brilliant these days. But I just feel that sometimes they change it all the time, and it's quite interesting the way somebody up there decides what goes in and what doesn't go in and things like that. And so I think I was always aware of not wanting to be kind of labelled, even when I was feeling that I could do with more support or help of some kind. And I went through a bad patch when I was training, when I was doing a training, and I'm not going to get too personal, but it was an odd situation with a certain person who was actually coming from a, what would you call it, a quasi-religious sort of area, who nobody wanted to work with, and I always got landed with this person on shifts and things like that. And I was very aware of sticking very rigidly to all the rules. I wasn't allowed to wear jewellery, I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, blah, 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 all the rest of it at that time. And this person just drove me just about mad because they were just so difficult to work with that I went through a phase of, I kind of started to feel quite sort of depressed and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was my first sort of experience with personal ill health, although I had come across people with an extended family who had things like manic depression, cyclothymic type illnesses where they would go from a size 22 down to a size 8 and I had to have ECT treatment because they couldn't get out of a manic phase and all this kind of thing. So it was quite harrowing to see somebody they were really lovely people, very caring, wonderful people who through circumstance again might have had something coming on, say like so through having to work, having children, being widowed or something like that, and having sleep deprivation, because I think sleep deprivation is a terrible thing, and it can really send you cuckoo.
Yeah.
And I did get a lot of sleep deprivation as well through having to do quite a lot of night shifts and things like that.
Yeah.
So
So was this when you were a mum by now, or?
yeah, when my daughter was born, I was just so happy. I was so, it was like, oh, it's mine, she's mine, sort of thing, and I was quite sort of possessive of her in a way, But sometimes sometimes I felt as a mum you needed to have just a bit of space to make an extra bond, make a tighter bond, because people were coming in with all this homespun advice about, we'll give them sugary water, do this, do that, and they're like,
It's too much, isn't it?
you're like, oh my goodness, come on, I mean, just about pulling your hair out. But I was a mum at 22. I was married for a year before I had a child, and she was really wanted and loved, and you think back on it and they're just like wee kittens. They're like wee kittens, and they're wee cots, and they're just so vulnerable, and you worry about everything, you take them you're feeding your child yourself, and you're thinking, hope I don't roll over onto them when I fall asleep in the middle of the night or something,
Yeah,
that kind of thing,
There's many a time, you must have done this, Isobel, where you go and check that they're breathing still. It's awful, isn't it? Because your head tells you.
You think they've been awful quiet for an awful long time. Oh, I better go and investigate.
It's awful, isn't
No,
it?
I know.
But yeah, I think that is a natural instinct.
Yeah. And then sometimes you beat yourself up. You think it's like a little silly equation, and you think motherhood equals guilt. Like this wee equation, and then you sort of beat yourself up with all sorts of things. But then, I suppose at my age now, looking back on it sort of more logically and more in that kind of perspective than an older person, and not being young and silly and all that, you think to yourself, I couldn't have been that bad after all, because they've turned out all right and they're independent, they've managed to have a family, they've managed to hold down a job, they've managed to make their way in the world, and that was the kind of thing that I always used to kind of worry about, especially with them being an only one as well, and you were so wanting them to be capable and independent and everything, and that was kind of something that used to kind of sort of worry you a wee bit,
And you've also got a lovely relationship, which is really important, isn't it?
And that's what I was saying.
And your grandchildren as well, granddaughter.
I've got two. I've got a grandson and a granddaughter. So I mean, I haven't had a chance because they left here when she was only 18 months and he was 4, just starting school. And
your grandchildren.
So with them being so far away, I missed out on a lot of that sort of thing. But do you know something? They wouldn't have the life chances. They wouldn't have had the lifestyle. They were struggling here in the city because of the situation with work, and opportunities are just not here. And I think a lot of people in Scotland find themselves going abroad for that very same reason, and they have done for centuries actually, since the Clarences, I suppose. But they go away. It's not that they want to leave their sort of kith and kin, but they have to go away for life's opportunities. And although if you've only got one child or whatever, but you just can't bring yourself. I mean, I cried for about 2 months.
Yeah, but
Quite off and on when they all went, but by the same token, I just couldn't find myself to bring myself to feel selfish and say, "Oh, you must stay for me," or "You must stay." You know what I mean?
Good mum.
But mothers are like that. They beat them, they beat themselves up, for various reasons.
We've been lucky, haven't we, recently? We've had a few people that we know here that come to the groups or that take the groups that have had babies, and that's been nice, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been great. And I mean, I think this is a great place, and it's really essential to have something like this, especially now with all the things that have been happening. I mean, there isn't a lot of places out there like this group, this Just Be. There's a lot of people here that, for one reason or another, find this is almost like a friendship group, a friendship ring, an extended family. And I mean, okay, everybody's going to have their niggles and stuff like that, but I think if people can sort of get back down to the basics and brass tacks, which they find that they can do here quite a bit, because they've got the support here and people are rooting for them. And I think that we want people to be well, you know what I mean? And I think that's really, really the crux of the matter. I mean, it's not about particularly everybody makes value judgments about things. What am I going to wear today? Where am I going to go? I mean, you can't be non-judgmental about everything, but it's about keeping things in perspective. I think the people of Dundee really appreciate. I mean, I'm Dundee born and bred myself. I'm not going to have any airs and graces or pretences about anything. I could put on a posh accent and I could talk very politely, and I can go and take some lessons and whatever, elocution or whatever. But no, I'm just me. I'm just a Dundee girl who was brought up and didn't have somebody that your dad that could afford a car or whatever. You had a lemonade bottle you filled up a lemonade bottle to heat your feet, and there was 4 of you in the bed, and there was no carpet on the floor, and in the winter time you used to scratch on the inside of the glass and it was like frozen and stuff like that. But you were loved. They were loved in their own way, and they did the best that they could by you. So I would never say, I couldn't even say they never had much or whatever, but if somebody's got love, then that's more important than material things.
Do you think it's a good thing now that we can speak more about mental health these days than?
Oh, definitely, because people, it was a big sort of like, nobody wanted to talk about it because it was kind of like maybe felt there was some shame attached to it, but it can, but for the grace of God, go ahead. It could happen to anybody at any time. And neither kings, I mean, look at the madness of King George, neither King, Popper or anybody could say, that will never happen to me. No, wait a minute, I could be that soldier, you know what I mean? It's not just, people have trauma, whether they're working in a traumatic environment that they've signed up for, say, like the army or whatever, a fighting force, or have trauma from childhood, things that have happened that they couldn't talk about or didn't have the support there at the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you say, it is a lot better now that people can actually not feel so ashamed of having been affected by mental health and the labelling and everything like that. I think people are a bit more understanding, because I think mental health problems have probably quadrupled in the last 4 or 5 years with all the lockdowns and all the things that people have had to endure, that where a lot of what they feel is the control over their own decision making, and that has been taken away, because people want to try and keep as much autonomy as possible. And quite often, I suppose it's a really difficult scenario because everybody's different, and some people have got more insight into when they need help or when they're ill or sliding into feeling different or behaving a bit more differently, like not wanting to get up in the morning, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to get out of the chair, not wanting to do their usual ablutions and wash themselves, take care of themselves, and sliding into a depressive sort of phase or whatever. And some people can sort of recognise that and reach out for help, but it's about being able to have some recognition of it and being able to, I don't know, accept the help when it's offered. But it is a kind of a two-way thing, and I think it's difficult sometimes because some people do lack a bit of insight or whatever, or don't realise that they're ill, because if they've got that type of mental illness, that they just don't realise that they're ill, or they might get treatment, they might realise that they're ill, they'll be taking medication, and then they think they're, I've been feeling fine, I'll stop taking the medication, and then they become ill again. And I think it's difficult as well for families to cope, in as much as it's so difficult for somebody to get somebody, say, like sectioned or whatever, because they're going to be the bad ones, but sometimes people need somebody to care enough to be the bad one, if you know what I mean.
I know, tough love.
Tough love, yeah, that's the word, tough love. And that must be really hard for somebody that's in and out of mental health and all that as well. I mean, although I worked in the health service, I wasn't in that side of it. I was in sort of like general. Yeah. Sort of, it was all physical, all to do with people needing to have bits and bobs taken out.
But then that can have its own mental.
And it's got, yeah. And the funny thing is, a lot of people are affected even by medications that they have, like when they're getting operations and things like that, getting some analgesics or whatever. I mean, people will behave in really odd ways that isn't, the way they would normally behave, sort of thing. And sometimes they are aware of that as well, and they would come and say, look, I'm really sorry the way I behaved. But you were coming out of an anaesthetic, you weren't yourself, you were getting drugs pumped into you, your chemistry was all squiffy or whatever. No problem. You're fine now. You're all right. You're getting better. You'll be home soon or whatever. But that's the way things can affect people. Drugs can affect people. Drugs can interact within the body. They can have really bad. One man's meat's another man's poison. Something might agree with one person and be absolute poison to the next person.
You've got all the sayings, haven't you? I love it. I love all your sayings. You're just a fountain of knowledge, Isobel.
No. The more I learn, the more I realise the less I know.
Thanks for that. I mean, you are so incredible. I love it. I love listening to you. And I'm not going to, this might get cut out completely because it might not make any sense, because I'm not actually going to say what you and I spoke about. Mm-hmm. But a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a drama rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And one of the scenes we were doing, and this is what happens, like this, and this is life. We were reading out a particular scene, and there was no setup for it, but someone was reading, and then I sort of noticed Isobel was getting a wee bit affected and stuff. So Isobel went away, and then I came and had a wee chat with her, and then that was not going to be shared with all the group, but we actually sat. It's a small group, but it was still a group. There was still at least 8 of us around that table, maybe. Mm-hmm. And you shared really personal, deep, from long ago to deep in terms of years, deep in terms of what's in your heart, and and it was so. It was sad, but it was so lovely as well that we actually were able to have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was very difficult for you, and it also was difficult for other people. However, the goodness of that was that other people benefited actually as well, because we know that.
Thanks, Claire. That means a lot to me to know that was the case, because sometimes you feel guilty about making people feel awkward, if you know what I mean.
I know.
There's certain things that could come out of the blue that can trigger people,
of course,
for various reasons and stuff.
But I think we handled it, and it was, and as I say, it's because as well you are so knowledgeable, and you are a go-to person if people need advice on bits and bobs. So it is good for people to know that.
I'm glad I've learnt something as I've got older. Maybe learnt a little bit more, and I should probably talk too much, but I'd rather be more of a listener than a talker, to be honest with you.
I think you're very good at both.
I'd rather listen.
But even me, I later reached out to you that night as well, just to check in with you, but also...
And that was appreciated as well.
I was one of those people that benefited hugely.
Did you? Oh, thank you.
You know, so...
Yeah, no, I didn't mind sharing that piece of information because it was something that if ever I felt I was going to go mad, there's nothing worse than the loss of a child. And especially when you're carrying guilt from other silly decisions and things like that, it's a very difficult spiritual, psychological miasma, mishmash of all sorts of complex things that are all floating around in a person. And I don't know if you've ever read that. Actually, John Cleese wrote a wonderful book he worked with this other two people to write this book, and I think it was called something like, I can give you a read of it if you want, Family Skeletons in the Closet or something like that. And it was all about stuff that people keep behind the curtain, things that people keep in the closet, and how it can be quite cathartic for them to sometimes it comes out bit by bit over the years, or sometimes it never comes out, and everybody's got different, like I say, family dynamics. You've got sometimes pure little scapegoats, or you've got other ones that are quite sort of forceful, dominant personalities, or, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, variety's the spice of life kind of thing. Everybody's different and everybody's making their way through life. But I think the most important thing is not to give up.
Yeah.
Is to keep that. Because I think I actually, when I went through a very difficult phase when I was training in that particular thing that I mentioned earlier on, I was almost feeling suicidal. And I've seen a lot of trauma in young people that I've come across in my lifetime who have been terribly confused, terribly let down by things that have happened to them, and felt that there's been people that have underwent sexual abuse, that have felt that they didn't have a voice, that people have got away with doing things to them that they haven't been properly brought to task for because they haven't had the evidence, and they've been given things Prozac or whatever. And young people, 17, 18, 19, and some of them have actually ended in suicide. And it breaks your heart because a lot of the time the help, they could get that help maybe in place a bit more quickly, you know, if the resources are put into the right areas. And I think that's how this place does such really important work. And I really think that you all do. And the fact that there's a place like this for people to come to where they just feel that there's not too much judgment going on, there's people that they could go to that can point them, signpost them in the right direction for more help, more counselling, things like that. And it's just not too clinical or anything like that. It's a lot softer, it's a lot more homely, nurturing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And you are a big part of that, you know, as I say, it is, that's the way it works, and that's the way it should work. And as you say, it's because it's not clinical, because it's driven by real people. Yeah, and that's really important. I mean, I've benefited greatly from being part of this group. I mean, I never thought in a million years there would ever be anything like that. And, you know, everybody's suffering. Dundee's quite a depressed area. It's quite an unemployment black spot, and I could see the changes over the year. I mean, this place used to be buzzing on a Saturday. There was a lot more work and people were a lot more able to have focus. They had a job, no matter whether it was just working in a factory or whatever they were doing, and they had their own wage packet coming in, or they were able to go in the time with their kids. I think, as I say, mental health now is a really important issue because I don't know if it's anything to do with technology or whatever, but I think a lot of the time long ago people used to, there was no big pressure, go out to their work,
they didn't all have to be Einsteins, you know, that they would come home, they'd do a bloody hard day's work, and then they would flake out on the settee, and then they would have some enjoyment over the weekends with their family and all the rest of it. But people seem sometimes a little bit directionless, especially if they feel that they've not got maybe quite special gifts or talents, or they maybe couldn't concentrate at school or what for various reasons or whatever, whether it's down to being ADHD or whatever. And I think it's still difficult, but for different reasons nowadays than what it was sort of more like a lot of poverty long ago as well. But it was a different kind of poverty. It wasn't the same kind of problems that they've got now.
Well, Isobel,
that's us.
I really, really cannot thank you enough. That's what I want. I love it. I could listen to you all day, honestly.
I'll better be home. Want to say anything else?
I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate this place as well. I think it's a great place.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody else does as well.
And I do thank you for speaking, about things that are a little tricky to navigate around sometimes.
I know, it is. As I say, it's a very personal thing to everybody.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And everybody's experiences are different.
Yeah.
So.
And thanks for all you bring. Thanks for all you bring to Just Be as well.
Thank you. I'm lucky in comparison. I'm grateful for every day, because I know people go through some really difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Isobel. Oh, that was just lovely chatting to Isobel. I'm always just feel so calm around Isobel and inspired, and I really do admire her and her skills. I feel really lucky to know Isobel. So thank you to our funders, the NHS CIF Fund and the SCVO Digital Pioneers Fund. This podcast is all about mental health, and as Isobel touched on today, it's from one end of the scale to the other. Thank you, and here's to the next one.